The night sky stretched wide over the small alien colony. Stars burned like silver fire above, cold and endless. The settlement below was quiet, only the soft hum of machines keeping the night alive. Most beings had already gone inside their houses, hiding from the chill. But one figure still stood outside, wrapped in a thin cloak, looking up at the stars. It was her, the alien girl no one wanted. Her name was Soraya, but few ever spoke it. To most, she was simply the broken one. She hugged herself tightly and whispered into the night, her voice trembling. I can't have children. No one wants to start a family with me. Human, not alien. No one. Her words floated into the cold air, lost among the stars. She thought no one was listening. For years she had carried this pain alone. For years, every glance at her was filled with pity or disgust. On her world, family meant blood, children, and heirs. Without that, she was nothing. But she did not know someone was listening. A few steps away, half hidden in the shadows, a human man stood still. His name was Daniel. He had arrived on this world only a month ago, working odd jobs, living simply. Most thought him unimportant, just another drifter passing through. But Daniel had sharp ears and a heart that refused to stay silent. He had heard her. At first, he wanted to step back, to pretend he had not. But the sound of her voice, it was too raw, too broken. It pulled at him like gravity. Slowly, quietly, he stepped forward. Soraya flinched when she heard footsteps. She spun, eyes wide, expecting mockery or judgment. That was always how it went. But instead, she saw a tall human standing in the starlight, his hands open, his eyes calm. I didn't mean to listen, Daniel said softly. But I did. Her throat tightened. Then you know, she whispered. You know why no one stays. You know why I am nothing. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. The wind moved between them, cold and sharp. Finally, he shook his head. I don't see nothing, he said. I see someone standing strong when the whole world tells her she is weak. Soraya blinked. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not once. She turned away, hugging herself tighter. You don't understand, human. On my world, without children, I am useless. No male wants me, no clan accepts me. I am an empty branch. No fruit, no future. Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady. Maybe where you come from, that is true. But where I come from, family isn't only blood. Family is who stands beside you when the world turns its back. His words sank into her like drops of water on dry soil. She wanted to believe them, but she couldn't. She shook her head. Pretty words, she said bitterly, but they change nothing. Daniel's gaze did not waver. Then let me prove it, he said quietly. Soraya turned back to him, confusion in her eyes. Prove it? How? By staying, he said. The answer was so simple, so strange, that she almost laughed. No one ever stayed, not even her own kin. Yet this human, this stranger with nothing, was offering more than any she had ever known. Silence stretched between them. The stars burned above, as if waiting for her reply. Her chest ached, her hands trembled. She wanted to push him away to save herself from the pain of hope. But her voice betrayed her heart. Why? She whispered. Why would you stay with me? Daniel's face softened. Because everyone deserves a family, even if it's only one person, even if it's not the family you expected. Her eyes filled with tears she did not want. She turned her face away, but the stars seemed brighter now, less cruel. She felt something she had not felt in years, a tiny flicker of warmth inside her chest. For the first time in her life, someone had not turned away after hearing her truth. The colony was silent, but inside, a storm was starting. Soraya did not yet know how much her life was about to change. She only knew that tonight, for the first time, she was not alone under the stars. And Daniel, the human who had nothing, had just given her the most dangerous gift of all: hope. The next morning, the colony woke with its usual noise. Traders shouting, machines buzzing, and voices mixing in the crowded marketplace. For most, it was another normal day. But for Soraya, nothing felt normal anymore. She kept replaying the words from last night in her mind. Then let me prove it. By staying. No one had ever spoken like that to her. No one had ever looked at her without pity or disgust. The human Daniel had done both. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself humans were strange, always speaking in riddles, always promising things they could not keep. And yet, something in her chest refused to let go. She walked through the market, eyes down, carrying a basket with the few credits she had left. Other aliens whispered as she passed. Some laughed quietly, others shook their heads. She was used to it. She had trained herself to ignore it. But today, it stung less than usual, because when she reached the food stall, she saw him again. Daniel stood there speaking with the vendor. His voice was calm, his smile small but real. He pointed at a few vegetables, counted his coins carefully, and took the bag with a nod of thanks. Unlike the others, he didn't bargain harshly. He didn't curse the prices. He simply accepted, as if peace was worth more than saving a few credits. When Soraya tried to pass by without being noticed, his eyes found her instantly. And to her shock, he smiled. Not the mocking smile she knew from others. Not the smile of someone amused by her weakness. It was warm, simple, as if he was glad to see her. Her steps faltered. She wanted to run, but her legs froze. Daniel lifted his hand slightly. "Good morning," he said. She stared at him, words stuck in her throat. No one greeted her in the morning. Not for years. She finally muttered, "Morning," and tried to walk away. But Daniel did something strange. He walked beside her. "You shop here too?" he asked casually. She frowned. "Everyone shops here. There is nowhere else." "Fair point," he said, not offended. He adjusted the bag on his shoulder. "Still, maybe we can shop together next time. It might make the stairs easier to bear." Her heart thumped. Did he really notice the whispers? Did he care? "Why would you do that?" she asked sharply. He shrugged. "Because no one should eat alone all the time." His words felt like a knife cutting into her armor. She had eaten alone for years. Every meal was a reminder of her emptiness. Yet now this human was offering something so strange, so small, and yet so powerful. She tried to push him away. "I don't need pity." Daniel stopped walking. His face grew serious. "Good, because I'm not offering pity." He looked her straight in the eyes. "I'm offering company." Her chest tightened. She didn't know what to say. That evening, when she sat at her usual corner table in the colony's mess hall, something unexpected happened. Daniel walked over, carrying his tray, and sat down across from her. Just like that, without asking, without hesitation. The room went silent for a moment. Dozens of eyes turned toward them. Whispers rose like a wave. The broken one. The human sits with her? Why? Soraya wanted to sink into the ground. Her face burned. She expected Daniel to notice the judgment, to leave in shame. But he didn't. He picked up his fork, looked at her, and said, "This stew is terrible. Do you think it's always like this?" She blinked. Then, despite herself, she laughed. It was small, shaky, but real. The first laugh she had allowed in years. Daniel smiled back, satisfied. "There it is. I was wondering if you remembered how to laugh." Soraya shook her head. "You're insane," she muttered. "Maybe," Daniel replied. "But at least we're insane together." For the first time, she ate a full meal without feeling the crushing weight of loneliness. For the first time, someone spoke to her like she was normal. When they finished, Daniel didn't rush away. He stayed, talking about small things, about the stars he had seen on other worlds, about how humans cooked food differently, about silly mistakes he made while working with colony machines. He didn't ask her about her weakness. He didn't bring up her pain. Instead, he gave her something far rarer: normalcy. By the end of the evening, Soraya's heart felt lighter. The whispers in the hall no longer mattered. She realized she had forgotten to count how many eyes were staring at her. She had forgotten to brace herself for insults, because Daniel's voice, steady and kind, had filled the silence instead. When they stood to leave, she hesitated. Her lips trembled, but she forced the words out. "Thank you for staying." Daniel looked at her, his expression gentle. "I told you I'm not going anywhere." As they walked out into the night, Soraya glanced at the stars again. For years they had looked like distant fires, mocking her loneliness. But tonight, under the quiet sky, they felt different. For the first time, she did not feel like she was walking alone. The colony had many strange traditions, but none stranger than the market of bonds. Once every cycle, families and clans came together in the central square. It was not for trade of goods, but for the trade of lives. On Soraya's world, family bonds could be bought, sold, or broken. A woman without children, a man without heirs, an orphan without claim. Such people were displayed like unwanted wares. Others could take them if they chose. If no one wanted them, they were cast out beyond the colony walls. For years, Soraya had prayed to never stand in that square, but her luck had run out. The day was cold, the air heavy with smoke from burning torches. Soraya stood on a small stone platform, a thin chain clasped around her wrist. It was not heavy, but it carried shame worse than iron. Around her, voices rose like a cruel storm. "Too old," someone sneered. "Empty womb," another whispered. "Worthless," another spat. Each word was like a blade cutting deeper. Soraya stared at the ground, trying not to tremble. She had no tears left. She had cried them all in private nights long ago. The auctioneer, a tall alien with a booming voice, shouted, "This one, Soraya of no clan. She cannot bear children, but she can serve. Who will take her? Who will offer a coin?" Silence followed. No one stepped forward. No one raised a hand. Her chest tightened. This was the end. She would be thrown outside, left to the wastes where cold and hunger waited. Maybe that was better than living in constant rejection. But then, a voice cut through the silence. "I will." The crowd gasped. Heads turned. Whispers exploded like fire, and Soraya lifted her eyes in shock. It was him, the human, Daniel. He stepped forward, his coat dusty, his boots worn, but his voice steady. "I will take her," he repeated. The auctioneer blinked. "Human, are you serious?" "She has no future, no heirs." No, Daniel's voice cut like steel. "She has a name, and she has a choice." "That's enough." The crowd erupted in laughter. "A human wants her? He must be mad. Waste of credits." But Daniel did not flinch. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch. It was nearly all he had earned in the colony, weeks of work, saved coin by coin. Without hesitation, he tossed it onto the platform. The coins clattered loudly, silencing the jeers. "Payment," he said simply. The auctioneer, stunned, picked up the pouch and weighed it. It was more than enough. Rules were rules. He could not refuse. He turned to the crowd. "Done. By law, she now belongs to the human." The crowd roared in disbelief. Some cursed. Some laughed harder. Others shook their heads, but Soraya, she stood frozen, her breath caught in her chest. She wanted to speak, but her voice refused. She wanted to move, but her body would not obey. Daniel walked up to her, his eyes steady. He reached out and unhooked the chain from her wrist. The small lock clicked open, falling to the ground. "You're free," he said softly. Her lips trembled. "Free? No. You just bought me." Daniel shook his head. "Not bought. Rescued. And I didn't pay for you. I paid to stop them from throwing you away." His words struck her harder than the cold wind. For years, she had lived as a shadow, as something less than whole. For years, she had begged silently for someone, anyone, to see her as more than broken. And now this human stood here in front of all, declaring her worth without shame. The crowd kept shouting, but their voices felt far away. Soraya's knees gave way, but Daniel caught her before she fell. His grip was firm, steady, like a pillar against the storm. She whispered, barely able to breathe, "Why human? Why do this for me?" He looked at her, his eyes kind but unyielding. "Because no one deserves to stand alone in chains, not you." Not ever. For a long moment the world stopped. The torches flickered, the crowd jeered, but none of it mattered. All that mattered was that for the first time, someone had chosen her. Not for what she could give, not for heirs, not for duty, but for her. As Daniel guided her off the platform, Soraya felt the weight of years lift from her shoulders. Fear still clung to her heart, but hope had begun to burn brighter. The human had not only stayed, he had fought the cruel market itself to keep his word. And deep inside, Soraya realized something terrifying. This was no longer just kindness. This was the beginning of a family. The night after the cruel auction, Soraya walked beside Daniel through the colony streets. Torches still burned in the distance, and whispers followed them like shadows. Some mocked, some spat, and others shook their heads in disbelief. But Daniel didn't slow. He didn't look back. His steps were steady, his hand occasionally brushing Soraya's arm, reminding her she wasn't walking alone anymore. Soraya's chest tightened with every step. She still didn't understand. Why would a human spend so much for someone like her? Why had he stood against the jeers, against the entire colony, just to free her? At last they reached the edge of the settlement, where Daniel's small ship rested on its landing struts. It wasn't much. The metal was scratched, one wing dented, and the engines groaned when they started. But it was his home, and tonight it would be hers too. Daniel led her up the ramp. The door hissed shut behind them, shutting out the colony's cruel voices. Inside, the ship smelled faintly of oil and old leather, but it was warm. Lights hummed softly, and the space felt lived in, messy but safe. Soraya stood frozen at the entrance, her cloak still wrapped tight around her shoulders. "This is your home?" she asked. Daniel set down his bag of supplies. "It's not a palace," he admitted. "But it's safe and it's mine, and now, it's ours." Her heart skipped. Ours. The word felt heavy, strange, dangerous. She wasn't sure she could believe it. He noticed her hesitation and gave a small smile. "Here," he said, walking to a small table in the corner. It had 2 chairs, though one was stacked with tools. He quickly moved them aside and wiped the dust with his sleeve. "Sit, you must be tired." Soraya hesitated again. On her world, no one had ever made space for her. No one had ever set a seat aside and said, "This is yours." Slowly, with trembling hands, she lowered herself into the chair. Daniel pulled out a small container from the heating unit and poured thick stew into 2 bowls. The smell of herbs and grain filled the air. He set one in front of her, sliding a spoon across the table. "Eat," he said gently. She stared at the bowl. For years she had eaten in corners, rushed meals alone, food that always tasted like ash. Now a human was sitting across from her, waiting for her to eat first. She lifted the spoon to her lips. The stew was simple, warm, salty, filling. Yet it tasted like the richest meal she had ever known. Without realizing, tears slid down her cheeks. Daniel froze. "Is it that bad?" he asked softly, worried. Soraya shook her head, unable to speak. She set the spoon down, covering her mouth with trembling fingers. "It's good. Too good. I've never—" Her voice broke. "No one ever shared like this with me." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Get used to it," he said. "Because you'll never eat alone again." Her chest ached, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from something new, something fragile, something terrifying. Hope. After the meal, Daniel showed her the small quarters. "It's not big," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "There's only one bed. You take it. I'll sleep on the floor." Soraya's eyes widened. "No, you bought me." "I should—" Daniel raised a hand sharply. "Stop, I didn't buy you. I freed you. And I won't let you sleep on cold metal while I take the bed. That's not how family works. Family." The word stabbed deeper than any insult ever had. She almost told him not to say it. She almost begged him not to give her that dream. But the warmth in his voice stopped her. For the first time, she dared to believe. She sat on the edge of the bed later, staring at the walls, her hands gripping the blanket tightly. The hum of the ship's engines lulled her like a heartbeat. Daniel lay nearby on the floor, wrapped in a thin blanket, already breathing slowly in sleep. Soraya whispered into the quiet, "Why are you doing this, human?" He didn't answer. Maybe he was truly asleep. Or maybe he had already given his answer. Because tonight, for the first time, Soraya didn't feel unwanted. Tonight she had a place. Tonight she had something that almost felt impossible. A home. And deep inside, the broken parts of her heart began to stitch together. Piece by fragile piece, The days after the auction passed quietly. For the first time in years, Soraya felt the warmth of safety. Daniel's ship was no palace, but it had become her shelter, her sanctuary. Every meal shared, every quiet laugh, every small kindness, brick by brick, it built something new inside her. Something that felt dangerously close to trust. But safety never lasted long in the outer colonies. It began one night when the ship rested near the cliffs outside the settlement. Soraya was cleaning a small set of tools Daniel had shown her, humming softly under her breath. The hum of engines outside was the first warning. Not Daniel's ship, others, raiders. The alarms blared before she could call his name. Shadows flickered across the walls as ships landed nearby, metal doors crashing open. The ground shook with the heavy boots of armed aliens. Her chest tightened in fear. She had seen raids before. Raiders took what they wanted. Supplies, coin, sometimes even people. And no one fought back. Because fighting meant death. The door burst open. 3 raiders stormed in, their armor blackened, weapons crackling with energy. Their leader's eyes landed on her instantly. Well, he sneered. The broken one. Thought you were cast out already. Guess someone kept you as a toy. His gaze slid toward the corner. Daniel stood there, his jaw tight, holding a wrench instead of a weapon. Leave her, Daniel said, his voice calm but sharp. The raiders laughed. A human dare speak? The leader stepped closer, shoving Soraya against the wall. She's useless. But maybe she'll fetch a coin or two off-world. Soraya's heart pounded. She waited for it. The moment Daniel would step back, the moment he would give up like everyone else always had. She braced herself for abandonment, but Daniel didn't step back. He moved forward. Faster than she thought possible, he swung the wrench with brutal strength. It slammed into the leader's helmet, sending the raider stumbling back with a snarl. Sparks flew. The other 2 lunged forward, weapons raised. Daniel grabbed Soraya's arm and shoved her behind him. Stay low, he shouted. She crouched on the floor, trembling. Fear burned in her chest. He's going to die. He can't fight them. He's just human. But then she saw something that made her breath catch. Daniel wasn't fighting for glory. He wasn't fighting for pride. He was fighting for her. Every swing, every desperate move, every strike was to push them away from her corner. One raider fired, the blast grazing Daniel's shoulder. He cried out but didn't stop. He grabbed the fallen weapon, turned it, and fired back. The raider crashed to the floor, armor sparking. The leader roared in rage. You'll regret this, human. He rushed forward again, massive blade raised. Soraya screamed. Daniel. But Daniel didn't falter. He blocked the strike with the broken wrench, sparks exploding in the air. The force nearly threw him across the room, but he held on. With a roar, he slammed the weapon into the raider's chest, shoving him back against the doorframe. The leader stumbled, weapon slipping from his hand. Daniel grabbed it and pressed it to the raider's neck. His voice was low, dangerous. Get out. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then the raider spat blood, snarled, and barked at his surviving man. They stumbled back toward their ship, dragging their wounded comrade. The door slammed shut behind them. Engines roared, and within seconds the raiders were gone. Silence filled the ship. Daniel dropped the weapon, his chest heaving. His arm was burned, his shoulder bleeding, but his eyes were clear. He turned toward Soraya. She stared at him, tears streaming down her face. You didn't run, she whispered. Daniel knelt beside her, wincing at the pain, but still steady. He placed a hand on her shoulder. I told you, he said softly. I'm not going anywhere, her breath hitched. She reached for his wounded arm, trembling fingers brushing the blood. You could have died. Why risk everything for me? I'm broken. I can't. Daniel shook his head, cutting her off. His eyes burned with something fierce. You're not broken. You're worth fighting for. Don't you see it yet? Her chest ached with something stronger than fear, stronger than pain. She pressed her forehead against his shoulder, sobbing. For the first time, the tears weren't of despair, but of something she had thought she would never feel again. Belonging. The alarms quieted. The night outside grew still. Inside that battered ship, 2 souls sat close, both shaken, both scarred, but together. And for Soraya, the truth struck like fire. The human hadn't just fought raiders tonight. He had fought the entire weight of her loneliness. And he had won. The raider attack had left scars. The ship's outer hull was burned, Daniel's arm wrapped in bandages and Soraya's heart shaking like glass. For nights after, She couldn't sleep without hearing the clang of weapons, the roar of threats, the echo of his voice shouting, "Stay low!" But more than the fear, something else haunted her. The way he had fought. The way he had stood in front of her, bleeding, refusing to run. It was too much. Too dangerous. Too impossible. One evening, as the twin moons hung low in the sky, Soraya found herself standing at the edge of the ship's ramp. The stars spread wide, endless and cold. She hugged her cloak around herself, her voice breaking into the night. "You're a fool, human," she whispered. "You should have left me. You should have let them take me. Then you'd be safe." Behind her, she heard the faint sound of footsteps. Daniel. His steps were slower than before, his arm still healing, but steady, as always. "You don't get it, do you?" he said quietly. She turned to face him, her eyes wet, her hands trembling. "I can't give you anything, Daniel. Do you understand? Nothing, no children, no legacy, no future. I'm empty." Her voice cracked like a breaking bone. "I can't be what you deserve." Her words echoed through the night, sharp and final. She expected him to flinch, to turn away, to finally understand why everyone else had abandoned her. But Daniel didn't move. He didn't even blink. Instead, he stepped closer, his gaze steady, unshaken. "You think family is just children?" he asked softly. Her lips trembled. "It's all that matters on my world. Then your world is wrong." The words hit her like thunder. She stared at him, unable to breathe. Daniel lifted his injured arm slightly, wincing at the pain but refusing to stop. "Family isn't blood. It isn't heirs. It isn't names written in some book. Family is this." He pointed between them. "Standing here, not leaving, choosing each other. That's family." Her heart twisted. Tears spilled freely down her face. "But I can't give you more. I can't give you children. I can't give you a legacy to carry." Daniel's eyes softened. He stepped closer, placing his hand over hers. His palm was rough, warm, real. "Soraya," he whispered, "you've already given me something greater than children, greater than a legacy." She shook her head in disbelief. What could I possibly give?" He leaned closer, his voice raw with truth. "You gave me a reason to live." The words shattered every wall she had built. Her knees gave way, but he caught her before she fell, holding her against his chest. She sobbed into his shoulder, her voice breaking again and again. "Why human? Why me?" His grip tightened, steady as stone. "Because you're enough. You've always been enough. You just needed someone to remind you." The night wrapped around them, silent but alive. The stars no longer looked cold, they looked like witnesses, glowing softly above. For the first time in her life, Soraya believed, she wasn't worthless. She wasn't broken. She wasn't an empty branch with no fruit. She was enough. Daniel had carved those words into her heart with fire, and no whisper, no cruelty, no auctioneer's hammer could ever erase them. Later that night, she lay awake in her small bunk, listening to his breathing nearby. Every inhale, every exhale reminded her he hadn't left. He wouldn't leave. Her fingers clutched the blanket, and for the first time in years, her tears were not from sorrow, but from something new. Something fragile. Joy. As sleep finally took her, one thought burned bright in her heart. If being with him was family, then maybe, just maybe, she had finally found hers. Weeks passed after the raider attack, and the world slowly began to change for Soraya. Where once she walked alone, now she walked beside Daniel. Where once she ate in silence, now there was laughter across a small metal table. And where once she saw herself as broken, now she began to see something different in the mirror. But change never came only for them. One evening, as Daniel repaired a panel on the ship's hull, Soraya heard faint voices outside. Curious, she stepped down the ramp and froze. 2 children stood there, alien siblings no older than 10. Their clothes were torn, their eyes wide with fear. She recognized the look instantly. Orphans. Behind them, the colony gates shut with a cruel clang. She understood at once they had been cast out just as she nearly had been. Her heart squeezed painfully. The older sibling stepped forward, bowing his head. "Please," he whispered, voice trembling. "Don't send us away. We'll work. We'll do anything. Just don't let us die out there." Memories surged through Soraya like a storm. The auction platform, the jeering crowd, the chain around her wrist. She could still hear the auctioneer's voice. Who will take her? And then Daniel's words, sharp and clear, "I will." Her eyes filled with tears. She knelt, placing her hands gently on the children's shoulders. "No one will send you away again," she whispered. Behind her, Daniel walked down the ramp, wiping grease from his hands. His gaze fell on the children, then on Soraya. She expected hesitation, questions, worry about food or space. Instead, he simply gave a small smile. "Looks like the family just got bigger," he said. The children blinked at him in shock. "Family?" the younger one whispered. Daniel crouched down to their level. "Family means no chains, no auctions, no being thrown away. It means you belong. With us." The siblings burst into tears, clinging to him. Soraya covered her mouth, her chest aching with a joy so fierce it almost hurt. That night, the ship's table had 4 bowls instead of 2. Daniel cooked as best he could, though the stew was thin. The children ate hungrily, their eyes shining as if they had never tasted warmth before. Soraya sat beside them, her hand brushing Daniel's under the table. He didn't pull away. Instead, he pressed his hand gently over hers, grounding her. This was family. In the days that followed, more outcasts appeared. An old alien man with no clan, a wounded worker left behind after an accident, a traveler with nowhere else to go. Word spread quickly. The human ship was a place of second chances, and every time someone came, Daniel said the same thing. "You belong. With us." Soraya found herself smiling more often, laughing even. She guided the children, taught them songs from her people, showed them how to mend clothes and cook grain. They clung to her like roots finding soil. For the first time, she was called by a new name, Mother. The first time the little girl whispered it, Soraya nearly broke into tears. She wasn't their mother by blood. She couldn't bear children. But to them, she was the one who gave comfort, protection, love. And wasn't that what a mother truly was? One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, Soraya stood on the ramp, watching the children chase each other in laughter. Daniel joined her, his arm brushing hers. "They're happy," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "So are you." Her throat tightened. She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "I thought I was empty, Daniel. I thought I had nothing to give." He smiled, his gaze soft but unwavering. "You were never empty, Soraya. You just needed people who could see you. Now they do. And so do I." The tears spilled freely, but they weren't bitter anymore. She leaned her head against his shoulder, the weight of her loneliness finally gone. In the distance, the colony still whispered, still mocked, still questioned how a human and a broken alien could call themselves a family. But it didn't matter, because in their small ship, laughter filled the halls. Love grew where once there had been only despair, and every soul who walked through their door found something they thought they had lost forever: belonging. From that day on, their vessel was no longer just a ship. It was called something new among the colonies, the House of Second Chances. And Soraya, once unwanted and unloved, finally understood the truth Daniel had given her. Family wasn't about blood. Family was about choice, and she had finally wonderfully been chosen.